Yeah, I like fruit as well, but you don't see me trying to wear it around like some kind of strange fashion statement, do you? He teased. Giselle just huffed and crossed her arms as she turned away, pouting in a way that Ash found incredibly adorable. Well, Mr. Chuckles. Since you find such humor in mocking your sweet and loving girlfriend, you can forget kissing and/or cuddling with me for the rest of the day. Ash instantly stopped laughing and looked like she had just hit him in the face. Now come on, Giselle, that's a little harsh, don't ya think? I was only joking, I promise. Look, I'm really sorry, okay? Please forgive me. He gave her a pleading look and she just huffed again, got up, went over to the snack table and came back with another peach. She handed it to him and he stared at it in confusion. What's this? He asked, perplexed. She crossed her arms again and said simply, that is what you can kiss and cuddle with for the remainder of the day. Dear. A dark atmosphere suddenly formed around Ash as he dropped to his knees on the floor and held the peach in one hand while he rubbed the floor back and forth with his other finger, a rain cloud pouring over his head. He cried comically as Brock just laughed like a madman. Ha ha ha. For once it's not me. Oh, this is good, he said as he laughed loudly. Misty grew a few tick marks on her head and made sure Horsey was cradled safely in one arm as she clobbered Brock over the head with her other. There, Brock. Feel a little less left out now. She fumed down at him. Brock just twitched on the floor in response. A door near the aquarium on the other side of the office suddenly opened up and Ash and his friends immediately shot to attention. Through the door walked in a woman that made the children's jaws all but drop open as their eyes widened in surprise. I thought she was in prison. Giselle murmured just loud enough for her friends to hear her. I thought she was too. Misty agreed. How? Brock said, perplexed. Ash didn't even say a word as he continued to stare at the newly arrived woman. The reason for their complete and utter shock was the appearance of the woman. She literally looked identical to Brutella. She had the same haggard-looking face, red hair that was pulled to the sides in two long pigtails and was the exact same height as the miserable old former restaurant owner. The only difference was in how she was dressed. She was wearing a long yellow dress, a purple short-sleeved short and had a fur neck warmer of some kind wrapped around her neck. She carried an expensive cane in one hand and had the same kind of sneer on her face that Brutella had. Just like Brutella, she was also flanked by two guards only. Her bodyguards were a little more underdressed. These two men were wearing only Speedos of some kind and that was it. The sight of which made Ash and Brock cringe, while Giselle and Misty looked disgusted. The woman strode over to the stupefied children and spoke in the same grating and nerve-wracking voice as Brutella had. So you four are the winning guests, eh? A little young, but I guess it doesn't really matter. She flourished her cane around in an exaggerated way, like she was greatest thing in the world as she then said, allow me to introduce myself. I am Nastina Hagerson, owner and founder of the Watercrown Hotel. The most luxurious and extravagant hotel in the entire Kanto region. She said with smug pride in her voice. Ash recovered from his shock after hearing that this indeed was not Brutella but apparently a relative of hers, which explained the extremely similar looks. He spared a glance at his friends and noticed that they had gotten over their own shock as well. Nastina looked at them impatiently and said, well, who are you? Ash was the first to answer. My name is Ash Ketchum and I'm from Pallet Town. He pointed up at Pikachu. And this is my starter Pokémon and best friend Pikachu. His friends then introduced themselves. I'm Giselle. She said simply. Misty. The orange-haired girl said. My name's Brock, miss. He said politely. It was obvious that all four of them were still in shock at seeing a clone of a woman they despised so much. Nastina merely nodded and then went to sit behind her desk, her two scantily clad bodyguards right behind her. Ash and his friends walked over and stood in front of her desk and waited for her to speak. She finally did and she addressed them as a whole. So which one of you won the contest in Port Vista that earned you a stay here at this hotel? She asked, but it sounded more like a demand. Ash answered her. I did, ma'am. She raised an eyebrow. I see. Are you a professional trainer? Won any big tournaments before? What is your background? She demanded again. Ash seemed confused at her strange questions but decided to just go along with it and answered her. Actually, I would be considered a rookie trainer since I've only been traveling with my Pokémon a short while now. I've not really won any kind of big tournaments except for the one that earned my friends and I are week passes here at the hotel after I won the Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament and also a smaller tournament I participated in at Vermilion City so I could win tickets for my friends and I'd aboard the Saint Anne. I've never participated in any kind of televised competition and currently I'm traveling the region with my friends, challenging the gym so I can compete in the Indigo League conference. Nastina interlocked her fingers and leaned on her desk with a critical eye directed at the kids. She pointed at the other three. Are you three trainers as well? She demanded. They looked at each other and Brock spoke first. I used to be the Pewter City gym leader and currently am aiming to be a Pokémon breeder. Misty went next. I'm a gym leader at the Cerulean City Pokémon Gym and am training to be a water Pokémon master. Giselle went last. I was the top student at the Pokémon Technical Institute and hope to challenge and win the Indigo Conference after I finish up at school. Nastina drummed her fingers together and after a few moments of contemplation said, so you are strong and talented Pokémon trainers then. She seemed as though she could care less what the four trainers had just told her about themselves. Ash decided to speak. Excuse me, but what are we here for, miss? The desk clerk down in the lobby said you wanted to just congratulate us for winning a free stay here and that was it. Is there something else you wanted to meet us for? He asked curiously. Nastina smirked and leaned back in her chair. Yes, actually. There was a reason why I called you up here and now I shall explain. She hopped out of her chair and walked around the front of her desk with her cane swinging in her hand. You see, there was a reason why I had my hotel participate and offer a week's free stay to whoever won the competition in Port Vista. I am in need of strong trainers and by offering a free stay here at this luxury hotel I felt that was the most surefire way in drawing tough trainers here to me. Ash shared a look with his friends before looking back at Nastina in confusion. And why exactly are you in need of trainers? She walked over to the window behind her desk and stared down at the ocean below. Her gaze rested on the construction site that was resting over top of the coral reefs as she spoke. This hotel was one of the greatest business ventures I have ever embarked upon. The fact that I built so close to the famous and beautiful Hutber coral reefs has been a major tourist attraction. As you can see if you go outside and look around, no one else has anything built even close to this area due to restrictions of building on or near the reefs from the city. Since I am the only one, people come from miles around just to stay at a luxurious hotel that has everything they could possibly want out of it while they observe and tour the coral reefs. I have made more money than my wannabe business tycoon cousin Brutella, from Port Vista, ever even dreamed of. Funny considering her biggest dream was to own her own hotel. That is before her untimely incarceration. Ash and his friends shared a glance with each other at hearing this. Nastina chuckled as she continued to stare out the window. If only she could see all of this now. She would be totally envious of me and I would love nothing more than to rub it in her ugly face. Giselle quietly snickered and whispered to Misty, look who's talking. The two girls shared a silent giggle at this as Nastina turned back around to face them all. As successful as my hotel is, I didn't get where I am today by ever letting anything be good enough. I learned long ago that in order to stand at the top of the business world you have to always have ways to improve and never stop thinking of ideas for new business ventures. That is why I am currently working on building executive condos out on the reefs themselves that only the top of the top will be allowed to stay at. Since only the very wealthiest will even be able to afford such luxurious accommodations, I will be able to charge through the roof. People will pay as well since nowhere else in the Kanto region can you stay in luxury condos that are constructed right over top of region famous coral reefs such as the Hutber reefs below us. My resort will be dubbed as the most desired and famous in the entire Kanto region and the profits I will turn over will dwarf what I make now. She began cackling again as Ash and his friends grew a little dislike for the money-loving woman in front of them that was seeming more and more like her evil cousin Brutella as she continued to talk. Ash decided to ask a question that was on all of their minds. He asked in such a way that didn't come off as being nosy, merely curious. If you don't mind me asking, Nastina, how were you even able to build your hotel so close to the reefs in the first place? Not to mention actually building right over top of them. There are strict ordinances and laws concerning humans encroaching on Pokémon's natural habitats in place all over the world. When it comes to building any kind of human settlements and structures anywhere near where Pokémon live, laws clearly state that it cannot affect the Pokémon's ecosystem. That's why there has always been such a balance between where Pokémon live and where people live. People don't chase Pokémon from their homes and destroy their habitats, leading to Pokémon never doing the same to us. That's why we coexist so well together. Those coral reefs must be completely devoid of Pokémon if you were given permission to build both so close to and directly over top of them. Ash was yet again very thankful for Professor Oak's teachings. If it wasn't for the professor making Ash study laws concerning both people and Pokémon as well, Ash would never have known what he had just told Nastina about. Nastina tensed up and then relaxed a moment later. It happened so fast that most people would probably miss it. Ash did see it, however, and it instantly made him suspicious. Nastina just waved her hand dismissively. Yes. Apparently the Hutbur reefs are just not able to provide the right habitat for any kind of population of Pokémon. The city had no qualms whatsoever giving me my building permits. No one else builds around here because the ground is so hard to break through and the sissies are just too afraid of doing the hard work it takes to make a business work around here. That's why everyone always chooses to build further in the city. The cowards. She ranted. Ash narrowed his eyes. He knew what she just said about coral reefs not being able to sustain Pokémon was complete Tauros shit. Pokémon could survive and thrive in the most inhospitable of conditions. He knew from all his years studying with Professor Oak that coral reefs were like heavenly sanctuaries for water Pokémon. The nutrient-rich seafood that could be found in the reefs, not to mention the natural shelter and homes that the reefs themselves provided and the shallow waters that protected baby water types from bigger predators, made coral reefs ideal habitats for water Pokémon. And if the hype about the Hutbur reefs were true, then they would be even more exceptional for water types to live in than even most other coral reefs. Something was way off here, and if Nastina's automatic tendency to dodge the subject on how she was given permission to build on the reefs was any indication, then something was definitely wrong. The short woman suddenly grew angry and clenched her hands into fists as she glared down at the reefs. However, recently I have encountered a problem with the construction of my condos. Her eyes darkened in anger as she continued. My workers and their equipment has been being attacked by a large group of tentacool and tentacruel ever since construction began. The cowards are too afraid of the slimy squids to go to work, and because of that, construction has been completely halted. Misty felt anger stirring inside of her when Nastina insulted the tentacool and tentacruel but didn't say anything. The old woman walked back over and stood in front of the kids again. That is why I offered a week's stay for the winner of the contest back in Port Vista. I need strong, talented trainers to get rid of those annoying Pokémon for me so construction can resume on my condos. I'm offering 1 million credits to the ones that can put an end to those nasty creatures. That's the reason why I asked you all here. What do you say? Will you take the job? That money will go a long way in funding your travels, especially with 4 of you. The best part is, I don't care how you go about taking care of them. Chase them away with your own Pokémon, capture them, poison them, kill them, I don't care. The only thing I care about is getting rid of that infestation so I can have my condos built and start bringing in more money. She finished her proposition, rant, and waited for the young group of trainers' decision. Giselle looked disgusted with Nastina. Brock looked like he had just been told that his subscription to Attract, a men's entertainment magazine, had just been revoked from him and was furious. Ash had an unreadable expression on his face, and Misty. She loved water Pokémon and everything to do with them. To see or even hear of anyone hurting or wanting to hurt a water Pokémon enraged her. Right now, she was shaking with fury. Misty stormed right up to Nastina and pointed a finger at her while she held Horsey in her other arm. Listen, you greedy old. Ash suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the woman. Misty looked at him with anger burning in her eyes as Ash whispered to her. Let me handle this, Misty. You're too angry right now and I understand, but please. I promise I'll take care of this. Trust me, he said calmly but firmly. Misty stared at him for a few moments before reluctantly nodding her head and walking over to stand beside Giselle, who started trying to calm Misty down. Ash walked up to Nastina and said with a firm and confident resolve in his voice. Nastina. My friends and I are not just Pokémon trainers. Our Pokémon and all Pokémon we encounter are our friends and we care about them deeply. It doesn't matter if they are our Pokémon, wild Pokémon or even someone else's. We love, want to protect and care for every Pokémon we come across. Someone like you who only understands cold business could never comprehend where I'm coming from, so I won't even try getting my feelings across to you because it would be a waste of time. We met your cousin back in Port Vista and you are both two of a kind. You only care about yourselves and making money. Everyone and everything else is just expendable tools for you to use so you can get your way. I don't have a shred of respect for people like you, and after hearing about how you would be so willing to take the lives of innocent Pokémon just so you can build luxury condos and make more money sickens me. I speak for all of my friends when I say that we will not partake in any scheme you have to try and hurt a single person or Pokémon. Find someone else to do your dirty work because we will not do it. He said resolutely as he stared the woman in her eyes. Brock, Misty, Giselle, Pikachu and even Horsey all nodded in fierce agreement. Nastina's face contorted into one of anger as she practically growled in irritation. So you would be willing to throw away all of that money just because you don't want to take out a couple worthless, nuisance Pokémon that you can find in oceans all over the world? Exclamation mark. Foolish children. She strode back over to her desk and took a seat, interlocking her fingers again. She then said more calmly, but with a slight hint of venom still evident in her words, if that is your final decision, however, then fine, do as you please. I'll still get those Tentacool and Tentacruel taken care of one way or another. Just don't come sobbing to me when you've changed your mind and want the money only for it to be too late. She threatened them with a nasty sneer on her face. Ash just stared her down and calmly nodded his head. I can assure you, Nastina, that won't happen. If that's all you need is for, then I believe we'll be going now. We do have a luxury hotel to enjoy after all, he said as he turned around and walked back over to his friends. Nastina huffed and waved her hand towards the door. Yes, that's all. Now get out of my office. I have important business to attend to. Ash and his friends left the office with Misty throwing one last hard glare back at Nastina. After the door shut behind them, Nastina looked at her two bodyguards. We are going with Plan B. Send out the advertisement immediately. I want those miserable Pokémon taken care of as soon as possible so construction can resume on those condos. Understand? She barked. Yes, Nastina. Both men answered in lazy tones as they disappeared through the door near the aquarium that Nastina had arrived through earlier. The old woman looked at where Ash and his friends had left through the main door and growled under her breath. Worthless, Pokémon-loving, idealistic brats. She then turned her chair around and looked out her window, down towards the reefs. She glared at the surrounding ocean around the reefs and narrowed her eyes. Soon, those annoying Tentacool and Tentacruel will be taken care of and my resort will become the biggest tourist attraction the Kanto region has ever seen. She rubbed her chin thoughtfully for a second and then grinned wickedly. Maybe after these condos are built I'll extend my construction over the entire reef and put in an amusement park. Not only will I make more money, but I'll be spiting those worthless Pokémon and people like those brats who dare try to stand against and deny me. She cackled like mad and visualized herself swimming through a sea of credits, richer than she could imagine. XXXXXXXXXX. After Ash and his friends had made it back to their rooms, they entered into Ash and Brock's room and sat in the chairs in the living area. Misty just cradled Horsey and fumed loudly. That terrible, nasty old witch. Who does she think she is? Wanting to kill innocent Pokémon just so she can build some stupid condos and make more money. She's just as bad as that nasty cousin of hers Brutella. Giselle said in disgust. That woman is obsessed with making money and expanding her business just like Brutella. Brock said. We weren't even around her long and I instantly started getting bad vibes from her. I think she's dangerous and I also think it's possible that what she's doing is illegal. He finished. Ash nodded. Exactly what I was thinking, Brock. He agreed. The girls seemed confused. What are you guys talking about? Misty asked, puzzled. Ash answered for him. Didn't you see the way she acted when I was talking about how I couldn't believe she was actually given the okay to build a hotel so near the coral reefs when no one else was, and how she was actually building out on top of the reefs themselves now? She instantly locked up and didn't want to talk about it. I personally think she's doing the same things that Brutella did and is doing all of this, under the table. I don't think she ever got clearance from the city to build any of this and instead falsified documents and lied to the city in order to build everything she has. She and Brutella are very crude and harsh business women who will do anything to make a fortune. He explained. That's huge though, Ash. Do you really think she's actually doing all of that? Giselle asked. Ash shrugged his shoulders. I wouldn't put anything past her if she is related to Brutella. Just being around her and hearing everything she said shows me that she is exactly like her cousin. Hell, Brutella paid to have you kidnapped just so I would lose the contest by not showing up, Giselle. I think Nastina is guilty of a lot more than just falsifying documents and lying her way around the city council. I, for one, intend to find out what her dirty little secrets really are. He revealed. Brock raised an eyebrow. Are you sure it's a good idea to get involved with trying to uncover potential dirty schemes Nastina is hiding, Ash? Things could get dangerous. He warned. Ash shook his head. I'm always getting myself involved in something, Brock, and there is always a risk when fighting for the right things. You know I can't stand by while Nastina could be doing something that is hurting others. She wants to have a bunch of Tentacool and Tentacruel killed just because they're interfering with the construction of her condos. I'm willing to bet that those reefs are full of life and several Pokémon live out there. The Tentacool and Tentacruel are probably just trying to defend their homes. He walked over and kneeled beside Misty and looked at Horsey. Is that how you got hurt, Horsey? Are the Tentacool and Tentacruel getting aggressive and starting to hurt those construction workers because of what's happening out in the reefs? Did you try to stop them only to get beat up? He asked. Horsey just lowered his head and nodded sadly. Horsey. The shame of not being able to stop the Tentacool and Tentacruel was obvious in his voice. Misty just hugged the small Pokémon closer to her chest and whispered soothing words to him. Ash shook his head. There was no way you could have overpowered and defeated several Tentacool and Tentacruel, Horsey. Even a trained Pokémon would have a tough time doing that by themselves. You tried and that's all that matters. Horsey nodded his head a little more upbeat as Ash stood up and paced around the room. I need to start gathering any and all information I possibly can on what Brutella is up to. I honestly think she is doing all of this illegally and is causing harm to not only the coral reefs with all of the construction she's been doing but also. If I'm right, then several Pokémon are going to be killed potentially and chased away from their homes in the process. Those Tentacool and Tentacruel are definitely going to get hurt if something doesn't happen soon. Also, if they get too aggressive, then who knows what they could do. Giselle stopped him. You mean, we? She asked. He looked at her in confusion. What do you mean, Giselle? She sighed. You don't really think that you're going to be doing any of this without us helping you, do you? We're in it with you no matter what you do. We're your friends and I'm your girlfriend, which means you will do as I say when it comes to matters of your safety. Understand? She said in complete seriousness. Brock and Misty came to stand beside him and smiled, nodding their heads. Pikachu also nodded to his trainer. Ash smiled himself. All right guys, thank you. I accept your help. Giselle nodded in satisfaction and then he continued. We're only here for a week, so in that time we need to find out as much as we can. We're definitely going to have to break into the 13th floor again so we can raid the filing cabinets in those rooms and see what all we can find in them concerning what Nastina has been up to. He explained. Brock nodded. We'll make further plans as the week goes on then, I guess. What do we do once we have all of the information we need? That is, if Nastina really is doing anything bad. Do we take it to the police then? He inquired curiously. Ash shook his head. We will wait to reveal anything we discover until the opportune moment. I have a feeling that Nastina is going to really step up her efforts to exterminate the Tentacool and Tentacruel very soon, judging by how she acted earlier, so if and when she does, we will wait for the perfect opportunity to expose her crimes. The others agreed, and then they all set to work planning on how they were going to go about finding and gathering any information they would need to eventually expose Nastina if she really was the twisted businesswoman that they believed her to be. XXXXXXX. Time skip. 4 days later. 4 days had passed since Ash and his friends had made the decision to start gathering any and all information they would need to potentially bring down Nastina if she really was as crooked as they thought she was. In that time they had been partaking in different tasks that was slowly helping them garner new info. Every day Ash and Giselle would go down to the beach and train with their Pokémon right near where the construction site of the condos was taking place. They would observe the construction zone and pinpoint exactly how far the condos were stretching over and into the reefs while they trained so as not to rouse any suspicion. They were shocked and angered to find that the condos were indeed cutting far into the reefs and destroying much of the beautiful aquatic habitat below. They also saw many water Pokémon swimming around in the reef that proved there really was many different species of Pokémon living in the reefs. They also saw many Tentacool and even a few Tentacruel swimming around the construction zone looking extremely agitated. Any attempts Ash or Giselle made in getting into the water were instantly thwarted by the angry squids who would promptly chase them out with poison stings and sludge attacks. Brock and Misty had been wandering around the hotel all week long pretending to be seemingly occupied by the different indoor attractions there were inside. That was just a front, however. They had been spending the entire time listening on the employees for anything they might know that sounded even remotely important. On top of that, they also wandered around and inconspicuously checked for offices and any other places up to the 12th floor that were for employees only and off limits to guests, which most likely would have meant they held information concerning the hotel in some way. Unfortunately, there was nothing below the 13th floor that had any private information concerning the hotel and or Nastina's actions whatsoever. The biggest thing that the four friends focused on all week was how they were going to break into the 13th floor and raid the offices up there without getting caught. They all knew that any info regarding anything that Nastina was doing that could be considered illegal would be up on that floor, where no one but employees and Nastina herself was allowed. Well, anything that could be considered shady or illegal would be somewhere that only Nastina would have access to, since they were all pretty certain that none of the hotel employees had any clue at all about anything that happened outside of their individual jobs. Ash also proposed getting into Nastina's office and going through a laptop he saw in there on Nastina's desk when they were meeting with her. He felt confident that any dirty schemes she had hidden away would most likely be kept on her private laptop. They had worked all week long on exactly how they planned on getting inside, and now they were just waiting until they knew Nastina was gone from the hotel before they did it. Depending on what information they managed to obtain, if all went well, they would then wait until the perfect moment to turn Nastina in and reveal anything that she may be guilty of. All they needed now was patience. XXXXXXXX. Nastina was not having a good day. She had her bodyguards announce the 1 million credit reward to the entire city through flyers, advertisements and even public announcements earlier on in the week, just after she had been turned down by Ash and his friends. She announced that anybody who was able to exterminate the Tentacool and Tentacruel problem would be awarded the money. The city council and police didn't like Nastina's heartless way of dealing with the Pokémon, but there was nothing they could do. Tentacool and Tentacruel were not in any way endangered species, and since they were interfering and trying to destroy Nastina's property, property which as far as they knew didn't rest on any protected habitats. Nastina could handle her problems however she wanted as long as it didn't affect the city and its civilians. Still, that didn't mean that the council and police weren't disgusted with Nastina. Unfortunately, not everyone was as upstanding and had such good values as Ash and his friends did when it came to respecting and protecting Pokémon. Dozens of people had already tried to get rid of the Tentacool and Tentacruel near the construction site through several different methods. Trainers would try to battle the angry squids with their own Pokémon and even try to capture them, but to no avail. The Tentacool and Tentacruel were extremely dangerous opponents when in large masses and were very adept at teamwork battling for untrained Pokémon. After the trainers had failed to stop the wild Pokémon, other people tried many other methods. From people trying to capture them in nets, run them over with their boats, spear them and even shoot at them. Several different attempts were made. All failed. Everyone had practically given up on taking out the Tentacool and Tentacruel and now Nastina had next to no one left to get rid of the problem. She growled from where she was sitting behind her desk and banged her fists on it. Fools! She shrieked, startling the bodyguards standing on either side of her. How hard can it be to eliminate a bunch of slimy squids? She leaned back in her chair and interlocked her fingers together. I'm supposed to be meeting 3 supposed professional exterminators soon who says that they can get rid of the Tentacool and Tentacruel. If they can't, then I will have to get rid of them myself. One way or another I won't be stopped from completing the construction of my resort. I've come too far now. She looked at one of her guards. Go and see if the 3 I'm supposed to meet with are here yet. She ordered. The man bowed and walked out the front door of her office. XXXXXXXXX. Standing out in the hallway of Nastina's office were 3 individuals dressed in dark blue, full-body overalls that had the image of a Pokémon patched on their chests with swirls in its eyes and a big red X, crossing the image of the Pokémon out in a symbol of extermination. They also wore similar colored painters' hats on their heads and wore long, dark blue boots on their feet. If one were to look close, then they would instantly recognize the long red hair on the female, the blue hair on the male and the much smaller figure as the 3 bumbling crooks from Team Rocket. Jesse, James and Meowth. They were standing around outside of the office waiting to be called in as James looked over at Jesse. Are you sure this was such a good idea, Jesse? Posing as exterminators when we don't even know the first thing about it. How are we supposed to get rid of the Tentacool and Tentacruel anyway? He asked, utterly lost. Jessie crossed her arms and looked at James. I've already told you, James, these are just disguises. We're posing as exterminators so no one realizes we're from Team Rocket. All that matters is getting rid of those nasty little squids so we can collect the 1 million credits and finally pay back our debt to Team Rocket so we can have our funds replenished. Otherwise we'll never capture Pikachu with the slapped-together machines Meowth has been building with scrap metal that we're being forced to settle with right now. As for how we're going to get rid of them. She grinned and looked down at Meowth. Tell him your genius plan to annihilate the Tentacool and Tentacruel, Meowth. James looked down at the small Pokémon as he chuckled and spoke in his very unique accent. I created a special form of acid oil mix that I made by mixing together da fuel that we use for da Gyarados sub. They used the money they stole from Brutella and a new one made for them by the Team Rocket Weapons Division, venom from Arbok's fangs, da toxic sludge and smog dat Weezing excretes, and last but not least. I added a little tartar sauce to spice it all up. It's got da same consistency as oil which'll make it stick to da Tentacool and Tentacruel once we dump it on and it's got da corrosion properties of pure acid. Once it touches those slimy water pests it'll shrivel up ta nothing. It'll be easy getting rid of da Tentacool and Tentacruel with what I've named da Team Rocket Sizzlin' Stun Sauce. If stuns before it literally sizzles into nothing. He gloated. James just looked amazed and then let a grin spread out on his face. That's so devilishly demented of you, Meowth. Great work. He praised his teammate. Suddenly the door of Nastina's office opened up and one of her bodyguards stood in the doorway. Are you 3 the exterminators Nastina is expecting? he asked. The three rockets stared in shock at the attire the man was wearing. Or at least, James and Meowth were staring in shock. Jessie was practically drooling over the near-naked man. Why yes we are. Jessie said as she overcame her lust-induced state and gestured to herself and her teammates. He nodded. She will see you now. The man stepped aside and then Team Rocket entered the office. No more than they had entered and they saw who was sitting behind the desk. For a split second they all froze and went wide-eyed. She looks just like that woman from Port Vista. Meowth whispered. It can't be her, can it? James asked nervously. No, it can't be. Isn't she supposed to be in prison? Jessie in a cracking voice. After they had stolen from Brutella shortly after her arrest, they were very nervous and scared seeing a woman that looked exactly like her, bar the clothing. Nastina took in the new arrivals and then spoke. Are you three the exterminators that said you could get rid of the Tentacool and Tentacruel for me? She demanded. The three snapped out of their stupors and walked up to her desk. Why yes ma'am, we certainly are. Jessie said in a fake sweet voice. My name's Jessie and these are my partners, James and Meowth. We're ready to take care of all of your extermination needs. Nastina looked at them closely and snorted. Ha! You look like a couple of jokers and one of you is just a Pokémon. She said snidely. Meowth looked angry. Hey what's da big-eyed oomph? Jessie suddenly clamped her hand around his mouth. Shut up Meowth, she hissed. Nastina looked surprised. A talking Meowth. Don't see those every day. Still. What makes you so confident that you can take out those pesky water Pokémon I'm having such trouble with? Half of the pathetic city has already tried and failed miserably to get rid of them. Jessie straightened back up and released Meowth's mouth. Well miss. She began. Nastina. The old woman answered the unspoken question. Jessie and the other two looked instantly relieved at hearing the identity of the woman. Apparently she was just a relative of Brutella and not actually her. Something they should have suspected when Nastina didn't demand for their heads as soon as she saw them, but the three of them has never been known for their brain power except for Meowth. Jessie, who by now felt more at ease after discovering this definitely wasn't Nastina, felt more confident in the lies she was about to tell. Well Miss Nastina, I can personally assure you that my partners and I are the best Poké exterminators you could ever find. We've traveled all across the Kanto region, performing the biggest of extermination jobs and are widely known and very popular. After hearing about your dreadful infestation of Tentacool and Tentacruel, we knew that only someone of our caliber of skills could handle the job. She bragged as she told lie after lie. Nastina looked impressed. Say that is impressive. I don't have anyone else willing to take care of those forsaken Pokémon and that kid with the Pikachu made it clear that he and his pathetic little friends wouldn't help so. Fine. You're hired for the job. Take care of them however you deem fit. She ordered. Should you succeed, the 1 million credits are yours. Jessie, James and Meowth looked surprised at hearing that Ash and his friends were there as well but shook it off for now and smiled at Nastina. We won't fail you Nastina. By the end of the week you'll be serving those Tentacool and Tentacruel as sushi. Jessie promised. Right. James and Meowth chorused. Nastina grinned wickedly. Good. Now get to work. She barked. The three bowed their heads and then left the office. On the way down the hallway James spoke up. That was too easy. Jessie laughed. Yes, what a gullible old prune. Meowth chuckled. Getting rid of those Tentacool and Tentacruel will be easy as taking candy from a baby with our stun sauce. James suddenly looked thoughtful. It would appear that the twerps are here as well. Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Jessie? He asked his red-haired teammate. Jessie smirked. If we play our cards right and find the twerps, then we'll be getting Pikachu as a nice little bonus to go along with all of that money. The three of them laughed together. We can't possibly fail this one. Meowth said confidently. No way. Jessie and James agreed. In high spirits while thinking of their soon-to-be spoils, Team Rocket left the hotel ready to initiate their extermination operation. XXXXXXXXX. Time skip. 1 day later. Today was the day that Ash and his friends were finally ready to break into the 13th floor, Raid the offices and go through Nastina's computer for any kind of information that could possibly be incriminating and land Nastina in prison if she really was a crook like they believed her to be. Currently they were all sitting in the living room of Ash and Brock's room while Ash explained the plan to them all. Okay guys, listen up. Ash began as he leaned forward in his chair. From what we have found so far from all of the info we collected this week about the hotel staff, the schedules of the hotel and Nastina's own personal schedule, she always leaves on Friday, which is today, and heads into the town with her bodyguards, to the local beauty salon. Giselle snickered. That woman needs a lot more done to her than a salon can offer. She needs like an entire makeup crew. Not to mention a good fashion consultant because her taste is hideous. She shook her head in disgust. Ash, Misty, Brock and Pikachu all raised an eyebrow at her and just stared at her with sweat drops rolling down the back of their heads. Giselle looked at them all in turn. What? It's true. You've seen her. That woman needs an entirely new face or something. Years of scowling and making those nasty faces has permanently set her face in those hideous, scowl lines. No amount of makeup will fix her. Trust me. Ash just nodded his head slowly and coughed. Reet. Anyway. Nastina is usually gone for about 3 to 4 hours on these days. This means that the entire 13th floor will be totally abandoned for that time. Misty. He looked at her and she came to attention. You'll distract the desk clerk with questions about what kind of attractions the city has to offer, good restaurants, inquiries about the hotel itself. Take your pick. These employees are slaves to offering top-notch service, which means that they won't deny answering any questions you have. Misty nodded in understanding. I got it, Ash, she said determinedly. He smiled and then continued. Meanwhile, I'll steal one of the keys behind the counter that allows the elevator to reach the 13th floor. After I steal the key, I'll wait until Misty gets done talking to the desk clerk, make it look like I'm interested in what he told her, and then Misty and I will come back up to the room so we can get ready to go. Really, we will be coming back up here to get you guys and then get back in the elevator. We'll make our way up to the 13th floor and then separate off so we can go through all of the offices and check for anything that might seem to be illegal. Giselle and I will cover Nastina's office while you two raid the other offices. If you find anything incriminating, only take a few of the most important papers and leave the rest. We only need a small collection of evidence to take to the police once we find a suitable excuse for how we obtained any information we might find. The police need enough evidence that they can use to get a warrant to search Nastina's entire hotel themselves. If we do find anything, then we have to make something happen with it by tomorrow, Saturday. If not, then the longer we hold onto any papers we might find, the more likely it is that Nastina or one of her guards will find out that something is up. If that happens, then she'll get rid of anything that makes her look bad and we'll fail entirely. Ash clenched his fists. What she's doing to those reefs and the Pokémon that live there is totally wrong, and I want to stop her. We can't do that though unless Nastina is proven to be a criminal. Otherwise, what's she building is her property and no one can stop her. Do you guys understand what we're aiming for? He asked them all. Brock, Misty and Giselle nodded their heads in understanding. Ash smiled confidently and stood up. Then let's do this. He looked at Misty. Or first, Misty, you ready? She nodded and stood up. She looked over at Giselle. Could you please take Horsey and fill the tub up in the boys' bathroom for him so he can swim around while we're gone? I don't want him coming with us on a job as delicate and sensitive as this. Giselle smiled at Misty. Of course I will, Misty. Misty looked down at Horsey. You be good, okay, Horsey? I'll see you soon, I promise. She cooed to the small Pokémon. Horsey looked sad at being separated from Misty but nodded his head anyway. Horsey, he said in a depressed tone. Misty handed over Horsey to Giselle and then turned back to Ash. Let's do this, Ash. He nodded and the two disappeared out the door of the room. XXXXXXXXXXX. Ash and Misty arrived at the front desk and then Ash hung out by the fountain while Misty walked up to the desk clerk. Excuse me, sir, she asked politely. He looked up at her from what he had been doing and smiled. How may I help you, miss? He asked nicely. Well, I was wondering if you could point me out to some of the best restaurants in the city. It's me and my friends last couple of days here and we want to go out somewhere nice tonight. Misty made up on the fly. The man smiled brightly and pulled out a small map of the city from behind the counter. Of course. I would be glad to help you, miss. Now if you look here. While this was going on, Ash slowly walked over to the counter and looked around. Upon seeing no one looking in his direction, Ash snuck behind the counter. He dropped down low and began looking around for any key that resembled the one he saw the hotel employee have the day he took them all up to Nastina's office. After looking around for a while, Ash finally spotted a small cubbyhole built way back into the counter. He saw in the very back of this small compartment, hanging on nails, were a handful of keys that was exactly what he was looking for. He quickly grabbed one and then crept back out from behind the counter. He walked up to Misty, who was still talking to the completely unaware desk clerk, and asked her as planned. Find any good places, Misty? The orange-haired girl randomly pointed to a spot on the map that held one of the restaurants that the man had been telling her about. This one here looks pretty nice, Ash. I think we'll all enjoy it. She said in perfect form. The concierge smiled and nodded. A fine choice, miss. I'm sure you'll all be very pleased. Misty thanked the man and then turned back to Ash. Well, let's go and get ready, Ash. Hopefully Brock and Giselle are close to being ready to go as well. Ash nodded and then he and Misty bid goodbye to the desk clerk before heading back to the elevator. As soon as they were inside and the elevator began its ascension back towards their rooms, he looked at Misty. Great job, Mist. You were perfect back there. That guy had no clue of what was really going on. He praised her. Misty blushed and looked down. Thanks, Ash. You were really great as well. She thanked him, feeling flustered by being alone with him in such a close space. Ash grinned widely and then the doors opened up. He and Misty exited the elevator and walked down the hall to their rooms, Misty clearing her head as they walked. They finally reached their rooms and Ash knocked on his and Brock's room door. The squinty-eyed teen opened the door a few moments later and they stepped inside, Ash triumphantly swinging the 13th floor elevator key that he had just fished from his pocket, around on his finger by its keyring. He had a wide grin on his face as he strode into the middle of the room where Giselle was sitting on the couch. Did you guys get it? Brock asked as he and Misty joined them. Ash grinned like crazy as he showed everyone the key. Heck yeah, we got it. You should have seen Misty. She was brilliant. He gushed over his friend. Misty went red again and just shook her head. Ah. It was nothing really, guys. Ash did all the work. But you made it possible by distracting the desk clerk, Mist. Don't sell yourself short. Ash told her. Yeah, Misty, great work. Giselle praised. Ash twirled the key one more before putting it back into his pocket. Alright guys, we're on a time schedule, so let's move out and initiate phase 2 of the plan. He said. The four friends then left the room again and headed back towards the elevator. Once inside, Ash made sure no one was coming towards the elevator since it was still open and quickly took the key out of his pocket. He did the same thing he saw the hotel employee do days before and moved the secret panel to the side. He inserted the key, turned the lock which revealed the second control pad and then pressed the button for the 13th floor. The elevator doors shut instantly and then they felt the familiar sideways lurch that came with the elevator switching tracks. A few seconds later and they were ascending towards the 13th floor. After a few moments the elevator stopped and the doors opened up. They looked out in front of them and saw the hall leading to Nastina's office sprawled out before them. Ash poked his head out and checked to make sure there were no employees or anyone else around. After being assured that the floor was deserted, Ash and the others stepped out of the elevator and started walking down the hallway quietly. Once they came upon the first two offices on either side of them, Ash turned to his friends. All right, Brock, Misty, he whispered. You two start going through the offices and search carefully and quietly for anything that may prove Nastina is up to no good. Remember that if you find something, only take a small portion of the evidence. Giselle and I are going to make our way towards Nastina's office and go through her laptop. We'll meet back up here in 30 minutes. Everybody go, he urged. Brock and Misty nodded and then took one office each to start going through. Ash nodded to Giselle and the couple then made their way towards Nastina's office. Once they arrived at her door, Ash pressed his ear against it and listened for any sound coming from the other side. He didn't hear anything and then got down on his hands and knees and looked and listened through the crack under the door. Yet again he heard nothing and stood up. I think she's definitely gone, he confirmed. He went to turn the knob and enter the office but found that the door was locked. Locked. Okay then. Let me think then. He started thinking about any way he could bypass the lock and get inside. How are we gonna get in, Ash? Giselle asked. Ash suddenly snapped his fingers. I got it. He turned to Giselle. Do you have a hairpin, Giselle? He asked his girlfriend. The girl seemed confused with the question but reached into her hair anyway and pulled out a hairpin. She placed it into Ash's eager hands and then asked, how is a hairpin going to get us into the office, Ash? She asked, completely confused. Ash straightened out her pin and then knelt by the lock. He stuck the pin in the keyhole and began jimmying the hairpin around inside the lock. You'll see, he muttered. Giselle realized what he was doing and looked incredulous. Ash, you don't really expect that old trick to work, do you? Nastina probably has a really good lock inside of this door that can't be pie. She was stopped mid-sentence by the click of the door unlocking and the creaking of the door as Ash pushed it open. He stood up, bent the hairpin back into shape, wiped it off, gently put it back into place in Giselle's hair and then kissed his shocked girlfriend passionately on her lips. Giselle got over her shock just long enough to start responding to Ash's kiss before he pulled away. He looked at her with a smug-looking grin on his face as he rubbed his knuckles onto the front of his tracksuit. He looked at her and smirked. I'm sorry, Giselle, but what wouldn't work again? He asked her with his smug grin still in place. She just continued to gape while he looked amused. Wah. How did you do that? She demanded. Ash just shrugged. It's simple mechanics of a device and knowing how to manipulate them, really. I know how keys work in unlocking locks and I know that you can simulate that same function with some other objects if you know to use them correctly. Hairpins are one of them. It's not that impressive, honestly, it's just. I don't know. Genius. Giselle cut him off. Ash, that was awesome. I never would have thought to do that, but you did and I'm very impressed. Don't you sell yourself short. That was very smart. She praised him. Ash rubbed the back of his head and grinned cheesily. I'm really glad I impressed you then, he said happily. He stuck his arm out to her. Shall we, my dear? He asked cornily. Giselle giggled. Yes, kind sir. Let's. She looped her arm through his and they walked into the office. Upon entering, they got serious and separated from each other. Giselle, you go look around the office and try to see if you can find anything worthwhile, okay? I'm going to check out what all Nastina keeps on her laptop. Ash instructed. Giselle nodded and then went to look for anything that she thought looked suspicious. Ash walked up to Nastina's desk and then started looking through the drawers. He eventually found Nastina's laptop and placed it on the desk. He opened it up and turned the device on. Once the laptop booted up, a password-protected icon popped up. Ash was expecting this and leaned back in the chair and thought. He thought for a little while on just what he thought Nastina may have as her password. He started thinking about everything he noticed upon meeting Nastina. How she dressed, acted, and what it seemed to be that she held most important to herself. She obviously cared about business and making money more than anything else. Judging by the way she dressed and acted, she was most likely very self-obsessed and probably thought that she was the greatest person in the world. He got it. It was so simple and obvious, yet for someone like Nastina she wouldn't think anybody was smart and or observant enough to figure out something so simple, or if you were Nastina and thought like her. So complex. Ash typed in what he felt certain the password was and waited while the computer processed it. A few seconds later the password-protected box lit up green and had "Password accepted" displayed above the box. Ash grinned and then stared at the password in disbelief. How could anyone be so money-hungry and uncaring for everything else in life? The words, "business before all," was flashing in the password entry box. A testament to Nastina's utter obsession with nothing but money and business. Suddenly, Ash had a feeling that he was going to be finding a lot of very incriminating things and heinous crimes filed away on this computer. He took a deep breath and then began searching deeply through every last cyber nook and cranny of Nastina's computer. When he finally reached the files section of her computer, he started finding out all kinds of various bits of information. From personal details about Nastina herself, employee rosters, construction plans, lists of future business ideas and potential properties to look into purchasing and much more. Personal things. It seemed as though Nastina didn't make her bodyguards wear those skimpy outfits for no reason. If the pictures and other things he was finding was anything to go by, then Nastina was a very sick and twisted person during her happy time. He eventually reached the password-protected files and knew that anything that would decide if Nastina was a criminal or not would be found in those files. He didn't have to think long about what he thought the password would be this time. He remembered how during his tech sessions with Professor Oak he was taught that most people subconsciously branched passwords to everything they needed one for in life off of one main, big password that they used for the most secure and important thing in their life. If the main or first password they ever made had something to do with the subject of, for instance, one's love for food, subconsciously that person would make every other password after that one to have something to do with food or maybe even a specific food. Most of the time this is just a subconscious action and people don't even realize that they do it, but they do. Of course, not all people do it, but a large percentage do. Ash and Professor Oak were two such exceptions. Professor Oak always kept the similarities between his passwords as minimal as possible and he taught Ash to do the same. Yet again, Ash found himself thanking Professor Oak for his many lessons and teachings. Ash typed in what he felt confident Nastina's password was and sent a silent prayer to Arceus that Nastina wasn't in the same group of password creators as himself and Professor Oak were. The password, "money is beauty," was processed by the computer and then came back a few seconds later flashing green in success. Ash thanked Arceus for his success and then prepared to open the first file he just unlocked. This was it. The moment of truth. Either Nastina was a criminal just like her cousin Brutella, or they had all just wasted their time, had taken a huge risk for nothing, discovered that Nastina truly was a legit businesswoman and was instead just a very rude, crass, nasty and uncaring person. When Ash viewed the contents of the first file he was instantly hit with two emotions. The first was relief. Because he now knew that all of the time and energy he and his friends had been putting into investigating Nastina hadn't been for nothing. She truly was just like her cousin in almost every way. Maybe even worse. The woman was definitely waist deep, or if you were Nastina's height, all the way up to her head in some very illegal, nasty plots and schemes. The second emotion he felt was more of just a burning anger at all of the horrible crimes she had been and was still committing. He went through every single previously locked file he saw. Each one getting worse than the last. The things she had been doing was just terrible. He thought what Brutella was doing to Mo and the crimes she had committed was bad. That was nothing compared to what Ash was finding. When he was done he just sank back in the chair and processed everything he had just found out about. One thing was for definite sure. Nastina did not in any way have permission, clearance or permits from the city to build her condos down on the reef. Hell, she didn't even have clearance to have her hotel sitting where it was right now. Everything she had built and everything that was standing around them was completely illegal. She had never even approached the city council or any of the district offices when she built any of the things she had. Ash found out that she had blackmailed some lower-ranked higher-ups in the council and in the district offices to give her all of the clearance and signed paperwork she needed to build her resort. She had threatened their lives and the lives of their families with torture and death if they didn't give her what she wanted. There were very explicit letters and visual images she had sent to these individuals that detailed all of the sick and twisted things she was going to do to not only them but their families as well. The details of how she was going to make the children The children's suffer was just beyond vile. She also had the muscle to back up all of the threats as well, which is why the lower-ranking political figures within the city that she was tormenting took her so seriously. She had paid off a criminal organization known as the Kanto Blood Riders, or the KBR. This organization of motorcycle riding thugs was full of vicious, bloodthirsty, murdering, vandalizing, arsonistic, thieving, terroristic, rapist criminals that were not the right quality for the likes of Team Rocket and didn't make the cut when they tried out apparently. So these horrible, wannabe big-timers all came together and formed the KBR to bring their own version of anarchy to Kanto in the form of being hired guns on wheels with allegiances to the highest bidder. Because of all of the things that they were known for. From killing families, raping women and just about anything else you could think of, there was a policy that all Kanto police departments enforced strictly and could not be budged on. The policy was that under no circumstances was a lone officer Jenny to approach any member of that particular organization by themselves. They had to be with a squad of other officers or else they couldn't engage anyone from the KBR. The reason for this policy was because of how sick the men and even women in that organization were known for being. There was no telling what could happen to an officer Jenny who fell into their clutches. The reason the policy wasn't also enforced for Team Rocket was because that since so little was actually known about their organization and since they had so few members ever captured. The police didn't really know what to expect from them except that they were very dangerous and stole Pokémon. Unlike KBR who were very public with their crimes and unprofessional, Team Rocket was different. They were very discreet, professional and quit with every job they did. They weren't known for the nightmarish crimes that the KBR was known for. Police policy for now with Team Rocket was that if you saw one you arrested them and interrogated them for information. Because when Team Rocket did strike big, it was always worse in some way than anything the KBR pulled. The KBR was so well known and public that practically everyone even knew who the leader was. He was a big, bald biker who created the organization after Team Rocket rejected him. His name was Alton and he was a very sick man. Again, a complete contrast to Team Rocket. No one had any idea who their boss was even though police knew that they had one. For all of these reasons, policy for Officer Jenny's was never to approach anyone from the KBR alone and to do whatever it took to take in a member of Team Rocket if they saw one. Within safety and reason of course. The worst part about it all was that Nastina was apparently the biggest customer of the KBR. With all of her money she was easily able to buy as much muscle as she needed from the KBR and that was why the lower-ranking political figures of Hutber City were scared of her and her threats and did what she asked of them. Nastina was smart however, she only threatened a few political figureheads in Hutber City and none of them were really very powerful nor were they very high up on the political branch. The ones she blackmailed, threatened were just high up enough to grant her permission and sign her authentic paperwork for the different things, places she wanted to buy and have built. They were just low enough though to still be intimidated by Nastina's threats and assure that they would never expose her or turn her in out of fear of torture and death for themselves and their families. Nastina knew her threats would only have gotten her locked up if she tried it with the real high-sitting political heads of the city so that's why she settled with lower-ranking individuals. On top of all of that, Nastina had several other crimes mounted against her. She had a very shady past and was involved in many underhanded business deals that went south all over the world and always ended with everyone involved getting arrested but her, since she would conveniently disappear before she was ever convicted. She was also a con artist and had swindled dozens of people out of their money in ways that would make what Brutella did to most seem childish. Apparently she also did a little Pokémon trafficking for Team Rocket during times she was low on funds and needed the income to invest into her next venture. Unfortunately, Team Rocket was smart and from what Ash could see, there was no way to fully track Nastina's past of trafficking back to them since they had kept her in the dark and only used her as a tool to smuggle their stolen Pokémon with. Something Ash saw that Nastina complained about and cursed Team Rocket for immensely. She was also responsible and involved in the disappearances, murders and kidnappings of several people, all of who had different standings in society and was also indirectly responsible for the sexual assault and murder of countless women she had hired the KBR to take care of, for whatever reasons. She also was involved with the dumping of harmful chemicals into the South Seas of Kanto years ago during one of her business ventures. To sum it all up and put the icing on the cake, Ash went through the hotel's account history and record books that Nastina had on file and was astonished by the inconsistencies he was seeing. Even for a 10-year-old kid, none of the astronomical increases in the hotel's budget made any sense whatsoever. Eventually, with enough time, checking, rechecking and going through several different account files, he was able to see what was going on. Not only was Nastina severely underpaying her employees, but she also had created false identities for her hotel and had the Watercrown going by several different names, with addresses and credit collections being set up to several different businesses and charitable organizations all throughout not just the Kanto region, but all over the world. These businesses and charity groups would raise and donate vast amounts of money to whatever name organization that Nastina had that particular group recognize the Watercrown as, and they would then send the hotel all of that money thinking it was a legitimate cause. Children's and Pokémon hospitals, homeless shelters, food and medicine clinics, research development centers for cures and diseases. All of these places were organizations that Nastina was falsifying her hotel as and collecting all of the money. And the thing about it all was, every bit of money that the hotel made she was sneaking under the table and using on herself. Hell, she probably only used money for the hotel when it came to things like paying her employees the peanuts that she did, keeping up on maintenance and cost of what it took to actually run the hotel and other bare necessities. Ash knew that the employees had to realize they were being shafted, but just went with it because they were all most likely scared of Nastina. The two scantily clad bodyguards she kept with her were probably just regular employees that were unlucky enough to be hand-picked by Nastina for her special jobs. Ash shuddered at that thought. All in all, the mountains of evidence Ash had displayed in front of him right now was more than enough to land Nastina in prison for 2 lifetimes. As sick as he felt from reading all of the shit she had done and was still doing, he looked around the office for a printer so he could copy out some of the more incriminating files onto paper that he could then turn into the police. The police. They were going to have a field day with everything they would find up here when Ash and his friends turned in their findings to them. All it would take is one warrant to search the hotel and Nastina would be screwed completely. He even reckoned that the police could really cripple the KBR with all of the crimes they had been a part of at Nastina's command. For the first time, the police would actually have a trail of evidence leading back to the KBR and could really attack them hard. Ash knew that even if Brock, Misty and Giselle found nothing of interest, the police had all they needed contained in the laptop in front of Ash. Technically, Ash knew that he could go and get the police today, but he felt like something big was about to happen soon that would have Nastina right at the center of it and really be the final nail in the coffin for her and her evil ways. Ash made a promise to himself right then and there that he would make sure justice was brought down on Nastina as hard as it could for all of the innocent people and Pokémon she had hurt, conned, stole from and even killed. Either directly or indirectly. Ash prayed to Arceus in that moment that she would stand behind him during all of it and keep he and his friends well.